Hi, I'm Dani Gasparini, and welcome to this segment of One-on-One. My guest today is Melissa Lukin, who is the Executive Director of Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse. CORA is the acronym we'll refer to later. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about CORA and give our viewers at home an idea of what you do as an organization.
Sure. So we actually are the only domestic violence agency in San Mateo County, and we provide a breadth of services from legal assistance, counseling. We have a hotline. We have a collaboration with law enforcement, with all 22 law enforcement agencies when there's a 911 domestic violence related call. And we have shelter and transitional housing, as well as counseling for child witnesses.
So let's talk just a little bit about that. How, if you are an individual that finds themselves in a abusive relationship, how does one find you as an organization?
Well, they can go to our website, of course. We have advertised around the community as much as we can. We've also done workshops in the schools so that teens can find out more about teen dating violence. And there's our hotline number, which is probably the best way to, it's our gateway to all of our services.
And I think I just heard you also talk about you're connected with police agencies, you're probably connected with healthcare agencies.
Absolutely.
Someone comes in through an emergency department and they can refer into your agency as well.
Right. We have relationships with a variety of agencies and departments throughout the county who are aware of our services and simply need to, request the help, and we're there 24/7.
You know, when we talk about, or when you hear the words domestic violence or relationship abuse, we sort of conjure up that vision of one individual physically abusing, physically hurting another.
Right.
But I think you're here to tell us it's a whole scope of abuse.
It's much more than that. Yeah, it's common for people to think of it as simply a physical kind of thing, but in fact it can take many forms. It can come in the form of emotional and mental abuse. Regular cutting comments, put downs can become normalized. People start to think that's kind of average normal behavior, and that can actually build over time. It tends to be a pattern of behavior that increases with time, so it will often, sometimes there'll be a physical incident and then nothing for a decade and then another one, a blow up. So it's hard to say that it's really just a physical kind of thing. It can be also spiritual abuse, and it can be about controlling your behavior, your whereabouts, your contacts, your life. It's really about power and control. It's not even really about anger management or violence per se.
Right. And that's why I imagine the hotline comes into play, and we will be posting phone numbers and websites and all of that throughout the 10-minute segment. That's how I imagine where the hotline comes into play, because if anyone is thinking that perhaps they're involved in a relationship like that, they can very safely and confidentially ask about, I'm experiencing these kinds of things.
Exactly.
Help me work through them.
Exactly. And so 30 years ago, there was nowhere to go, right? There was nobody to call. Now, there's actually an experienced counselor on the other end of the phone ready to meet you where you're at. You may or may not be ready to leave the relationship. And by the way, this can occur in all kinds of relationships. It's not
I was just going to ask that. So we typically think male-female relationship.
Right.
It could be
sure. It can be
sibling.
same-sex relationships. It can be in the immigrant community. It can be in all kinds of, it doesn't matter. It's sort of an equal opportunity issue. It can be among the poor, among the rich. It's really spread, and 1 in 3 women in their lifetimes will experience this, and so it's really quite prevalent. But the fact is that the hotline is there to provide counseling, to provide a safety plan. You may not even be ready to leave, but just to know if you needed to flee, what you need to do to take with you.
So, and that was one of the other things I wanted to talk about. We read about domestic violence, we read about relationship abuse in the newspapers, and we see it on the news. We sort of think it happens in the other counties, the other neighborhoods. But you had just said something I think is alarming, that 1 in 3 people have been touched by this kind of abuse.
That's right.
Let's talk about that in San Mateo County.
Yeah.
What are we seeing?
In our county, we take over 5,000 calls a year, and by the way, the calls have increased upwards of 27 or 30% from law enforcement. So we're seeing far greater crisis-oriented kinds of calls, frankly, far greater levels of abuse. And so the change in this past year with the economy has been notable, both in terms of our hotline calls and our law enforcement calls. But the fact is that, yeah, 1 in 3 women will experiencing it, and at this point we have over 5,000 calls from individuals who those are the ones who know about us and have the courage to call. So we figure we're only reaching about 25% of the need. Really.
So let's talk about this increase. You mentioned that one of the factors could be that with the economy and the environment the way it is today, job loss, just the environment itself is much more stressful, which can lead to sort of bad habit patterns. Do you think part of it also is that we're educating our community better, that people are recognizing that they may be in an abusive relationship and seeking out and getting help? I mean, could it be a little bit of a lot of things?
Yeah, I think it could be a little bit of both. I think that's a good point, that people are more aware of what it actually is. That we've come a long way from the period of time where, you know, essentially there were no options, and the victim assumed that it was her fault or his fault, that there was no help available.
Right.
You know,
we couldn't talk about it.
Right. Now we at least can talk about it somewhat, but we still experience an enormous number of folks who come to us feeling an enormous amount of shame, which was really part of the dynamic of domestic violence, for whatever reason, is that people often blame themselves. And people will find themselves in a domestic violence relationship or an abusive relationship, never anticipating it or seeing it coming. And in fact, the sad thing around teens, just to comment on what's happening with our youth, we handle workshops with teens as well, and what we're finding is that 40% of teens, at least nationwide, will tell you they know someone their age who's been beaten by their partners. 30% of girls will say that they have been forced to do something that they didn't want to.
So do you think this statistic is greater today than it were 20 years ago?
I think it's hard to say. You know, what you said earlier really has some validity to it, that we may also know more about it, and so we're getting more calls because people are aware of it. So it's hard to say when there's an increase in calls exactly what the cause is, but this last couple of years, I would say, is clearly a result of a tough economy. You know, sadly to say, that most of the domestic violence-related homicides in this county, virtually every one had alongside of, among the variables, financial abuse, so financial hardship, rather.
Is it part of CORA's practice to try and determine cause to deal with the effect, or are you just an organization that says, look, it's here and we are going to focus on helping people and getting out of that situation?
Well, the fact is we try to do both. The most important thing is to prevent the intergenerational cycle of abuse, because we all know that if you experience it and you witness it as a young person, you're likely to enact it or to attract a relationship similar to it. So we try to do as much prevention work as we can. We have a very small staff to do it, and smaller now than we've had in the past. But the fact is that it's a very important piece of our work, and we'll outreach to the adult community, service providers in the health community, among the human services agencies, the various social workers and so forth, and also to youth as well.
Well, and I do want to get to the event, but I have one last question. So it sounds like the agency then stays in touch with the individual even after perhaps there's some kind of resolution in the relationship. You continue to stay in touch in order to counsel through.
We'll try to do that as best as we can. You know, most of the families have complex situations, and sometimes we have to move them out of the county. That's the saddest part, is when we can't stay in touch with them that way.
Well, one of the important things for our viewers to know is that your agency, like other nonprofits, relies on community support and government funding.
Very much so.
Right, and I know that the calls are up and the funding is reduced. It's all over the board. Tell us about this event that's happening as one of the ways that we can help you, increase your funding.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to tell you. We have a fabulous event coming up May 4th at the Menlo Circus Club from 6 to 9 p.m. Will Durst will be the comedian, entertainer, and we have Lloyd LaQuesta from KTVU emceeing it for us. We're expecting about 200 folks. They can help us a great deal. It's one of our biggest fundraisers of the year. We really rely on it greatly. Of course, other ways people can help is to help with time and money, of course, and volunteering is another way that people can assist us. We have an Adopt a Family program. They can volunteer as well if they're interested in doing direct service with our clients. And but we really hope to see a lot of folks out on May 4th.
Well, our viewers, please know that if you're interested in this event, go to their website. It will be on our program. Also, give them a call. We've sort of heard Melissa tell us they need our support. It's an amazing organization. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us on this segment of One-on-One. If we had 10 seconds as our last parting thought, what do you want to make sure our viewers know about CORA and how they can help?
I want people who are experiencing abuse to know that it's not their fault, that they're not alone, and that help is available. And I want folks who want to help to come out on May 4th and also check out our website.
All right, we'll see you May 4th at the event. Thanks for joining me, Melissa. We'll see you next time on the segment of One-on-One.